Hello, my name is Bill Novicki. I'm from Northern Illinois. I'm about 2 hours southwest of Chicago, and I'm here today to talk about my interpretive walking tour. And the park that I have chosen today is Starved Rock State Park in Illinois. So the subject today is the circle of life, or about pine trees, anyways. Pine trees are one of my favorite types of trees that I like to look at and view here. Starved Rock has an amazing variety of pine trees. Um, we have quite a few, not as many as you would see like in Northern California or areas like that, but we still have quite a lot and different unique species of pine trees here. Um, I have a lot of family lives in Northern California, so I love to go out there too and look at the beautiful pine trees they have and get to see the different types and varieties they have. But Starved Rock is a great place to walk around and see all those beautiful pines. I go there a lot with my wife and my dog Parker. It's about 15 minutes south of where I live, so it's real easy for me to get to and to really walk it and enjoy it. So today we're here to talk about pine trees. And one of the things I like to, kind of talk to people about is, have you ever wondered how a pine tree came to be? How any tree came to be, really? The process. We all know, there's a seed, we all know there's ground, we all know there's growth. But have we ever really looked at the stages and recognized the stages of how that life cycle has come to be? So I'm here to talk about those few stages. First stage being, of course, the seed and the importance of a pine cone within the seed. Um, then to talk about saplings, so like as your young tree. Then to finally get into an adult tree. Just for instance, here is a section that's kind of big of a beautiful white pine branch. So it's real soft, as you can see, not bristly. The needles are very long, as you can see, and it's just a very beautiful pine tree. So the first stage I'm going to get into here is the seed, which many people think that like a pine cone is actually a seed, when in fact it is not a seed, but it's more or less a protector, a carrier of the seed, something that keeps the seed safe through the process. So what it is male pine cones are usually towards the bottom of a tree, and they really consist of just pollen, whereas female pine cones are more towards the top of a tree, and they're the ones that accept the pollen and where the seed is there to then be fertilized by the pollen. So a pine cone at the top of a tree, a female, will usually be closed until a certain point in its life when it will open up, and then the wind would blow, or a pollinator or something would then take the pollen from the male pine cone and push it up into the female pine cone underneath the scaly part of it. Then the pine cone will then close again and fertilize that seed. I unfortunately couldn't find a closed female pine cone because they're very hard to get. They're at the top of the tree, and unless you're cutting the tree down or you're climbing the tree, you really can't get them. So I do have a picture here that roughly just shows the closed pine cone. It's green. I know it's really hard to see on this camera here, but it's really just closed and it's kind of green like that. Those were the female closed pine cone. This right here is a Norway maple. Here's a little branch of that. This is actually a fertilized pine cone. You can tell by its brown. It's real kind of crunchy. You can see if you look at the end, they're kind of open. They're not closed. This is fertilized, but it's not ready to fall off the branch yet. What happens is when it gets fertilized, it'll then close the points here and then kind of dry up. And then when it's ready, it'll finally fall. And the seeds will then fall out of these little scaly parts. Here is the same exact tree. This is a Norway pine, one that has already fallen on the ground that has dropped its seeds out of the actual cone. So you can see a huge color difference in between these two. The camera kind of doesn't show it as well, but this right here is the one that has fallen on the ground, and the seeds have actually already fallen out. This one has not fallen yet, and the seeds are actually still inside. So you can kind of see the difference between those two. And again, on the end is kind of open and letting the scales open up so that the seed can fall out. next is the section that we talk about would be what happens once those seeds go into the ground and start to grow. At that point, when we see those seeds growing and that tree pops out of the ground, we usually call that a sapling, something small, a little fragile, a mini tree, if you will, that's starting to grow. So here I have a Douglas fir sapling, which I was very, very fortunate to find. Very hard to find this time of year. It's getting towards winter here for us, and it was hard to find while I was out and about. I did actually find this, and just so you know, I will plant this back into the ground after this video. I do not want to deprive it of its life, and so I will try to replant this and make sure that I take care of it and monitor it and make sure it'll actually regrow. But I just want to bring this on here to show you. You can see it's real small. Here's our root system down here on the bottom. It's pretty much the same thing as what you would think a tree is, but just mini. Looks just like a little pine tree, but it's actually pretty small here. This is a Douglas fir, and like I said, it'll get to be about 200 feet. So it's a pretty big tree once it's fully grown, and it will hopefully bring a lot of joy to the next people that come along to see it. So in the meantime, before this gets to adulthood, it's very fragile. It needs to be protected. Animals are very easily to munch on this, so you want to make sure that they kind of stay protected. And it's kind of cool to see these once they start growing in the park, and you kind of walk around and see the different types. And it's fun to watch it, from a sapling grow all the way to a big tree. It's a very rewarding experience to see that little tiny itty bitty pine tree grow into something that's 200 feet tall. Now, granted, that's a lot of years, and hopefully we all get to see something like that one day to understand that. Some of the pines that we see in Starved Rock are eastern white pines. We have a lot of red pines, yellow pines. We have some Douglas firs. We have some Norway pines, blue spruces. There's a lot of different types of trees that we see out there walking around. It's just a beautiful area to look at that. So after that becomes a sapling, the next stage is to become an adult. So let's say it survives the animals, it survives the weather in the winter, and now it starts to become an adult tree. That's when it gets interesting. So here I have a chunk of blue spruce, and in this section I'd like to really talk to you about the different rings and it becoming more stable. So actually I'm going to get a little bit of water here. Kind of wipe on this, that way you can see the rings a little bit better. Now this chunk of tree is not actually from Starved Rock, unfortunately, because I didn't want to cut down a live tree in Starved Rock. This is actually from my backyard. But this is a blue spruce that I did cut down, and I just want to kind of talk about the rings. I know it's very, very hard probably to see in this camera. But so the rings on this tree kind of tell you the lifespan of this tree and how long it lived. You'll kind of notice all sorts of different rings here. The lighter ones and the darker ones actually tell two different stories. The lighter ones are usually spring growth, where they will a layer that will grow on in spring, and the darker ones are usually more summer fall rings. So as you can see here, we have all sorts of different rings. We kind of just go through and count them: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, roughly 13. So this tree is roughly 13 years old. We can tell that by kind of counting this. It's pretty accurate for the most part, as long as you're counting the correct amount of rings and kind of get that feel for how to do that. What you'll see in these trees, though, in areas like Starved Rock, is it's kind of interesting to see them grow up real tall. And like I said, some of these trees can get up to 100, 200 feet tall. Well, when they're all condensed in the woods, like at Starved Rock, you see a lot of low branches that actually don't survive because of light that doesn't get down there. So it's kind of interesting. Everyone thinks when they think of pine tree, they think Christmas tree, kind of like what's on my shirt here. But most of the time in woodlands, those pines are actually pretty high up. So you'll see a trunk and then a lot of those pine branches up top, almost like a palm tree, if you will, in some of your dense areas, because those lower branches really don't get a lot of light. So in Starved Rock, especially where it's dense woods, you don't see a lot of those nice, beautiful pines. You see a lot of brought up pine trees, but that's not done on purpose. They don't cut those or anything. It's just done because that's just how the branches unfortunately die out, and the trees grow taller to get a little more light up top. So that's pretty much how an adult tree looks. The yeah, so you can cut those trees like that to really expose those rings to see how the tree is grown and how it comes to that point. So really, in that was pretty much the life cycle we went through. We went through how the seed inside the pine cone is fertilized, and then grows into the ground, and then becomes our sapling, and then someday that sapling becomes into our adult tree. And like I said, Starved Rock has an amazing assortment of trees throughout its land that you can really just enjoy and see out there. So what we did is we really gained a knowledge of a small part of the life cycle. Obviously, there's a little more to it with different things growing, but hopefully now at least you understand maybe a little bit more, and maybe you learn something on that. And hopefully you understand the process of what actually a pine cone is and how it becomes a pine tree. So I'd like to thank you guys very, very much for listening. Like I said, I hope you learned something new. I hope you learned something exciting. And now you can tell all your friends you've learned a little bit about the life cycle of a pine tree, which I know is just the most exciting thing in the world to most of us nature lovers anyways. But yeah, so thank you guys very much. Again, I appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.